Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Oracle Licensing and Audit Challenges, sponsored by Scott and Scott LLP, an intellectual property and technology law firm located in Southlake, Texas. Recently recognized by Finance Monthly magazine as the best technology law firm in the USA for the third year in a row. Your presenter today is Julie Machal-Fulks. She is a partner at Scott and Scott. She has been representing mid-market and large enterprise clients in high-stakes software license transaction and disputes for more than a decade. Today's presentation will be recorded, and you'll receive a link in the next few days. Please enter any questions in the questions box, and Julie will answer as many as time allows. For those of you requiring Texas, Illinois, or California CLE credit, Diana Peterson will follow up with you upon completion of the webinar. You also will receive a short survey requesting feedback on today's presentation and any ideas for future topics. We'd appreciate hearing from you. Now I'll turn it over to Julie.
Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate that kind introduction. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on Oracle licensing and audit challenges. My name is Julie Machal-Fulks, as Marcus said. We have our office here in Southlake, Texas, where today I will be talking a little bit about challenges that many of my clients have when dealing with their Oracle licenses. 5 years ago, if you had said to me, Julie, we have a licensing inquiry from Oracle, I would have said, oh, good. At least it's not one of the bad ones. At least it's one that we can address and they'll be reasonable. We can perhaps get out of there without too much heartache or without too much unexpected financial surprises. That's simply not the case anymore. Oracle has finally come on board with the standard audit approach, which is let's increase revenue and let's organize ourselves around getting clients to be more interested in license compliance. And so today I'd like to help you prepare for that new Oracle approach. And if you can still call 5 years new anyway, I'd like to help you prepare for some of those challenges and give you an opportunity to address internally some of the issues that I see coming up with Oracle audits. So today during licensing, we're going to talk about some of the standard licensing terms, including processor, user, and revenue-based licenses. A lot of my clients are talking to me about both getting into and terminating or concluding unlimited license agreements. So we will talk a little bit about that. I also want to spend some time talking about the new Java licensing changes. I would say right now, 2 out of every 3 clients that I talk to about Oracle includes at least a small discussion about the Java licensing changes. So we definitely want to make sure that we touch on that. I want to talk about what the implications are when Oracle acquires a company with whom you already do business from a software perspective. And finally, I want to talk about audits, surprises, and some of the detriments and benefits to the resolution of an Oracle audit. So we'll go through all of those today. And as Marcus said, if you have a question, please feel free to ask it. I won't be able to address all of the questions, and I may not be able to address very many at all, but if you'll send them, I have a better chance of getting it to you. On the licensing overview, we have 2 main types of products that Oracle identifies. They have the application products and they have the technology products. Those are important because in some instances, when Oracle is renegotiating a license agreement, whether it's an Oracle Master Agreement, an OMA, an Oracle Software License and Services Agreement, an OLSA, or any other type of license, an OPN, an Oracle Partner Network Agreement, any kind of redistribution agreement, whether it's a value-added reseller agreement, they often make a determination about what type of transaction it will be based on whether it's an application product or a technology product. There are also different licensing requirements for those products. And so it's important to make sure when you're researching or evaluating what type of licenses do you have, that you are making sure that you understand the distinction between those two types of products. As I mentioned, we have commonly processor, user, and revenue-based licensing, as well as unlimited licenses. Those are not the only types of licenses. Those are just the most common ones that I see regularly throughout large and medium-sized enterprises. Processor licenses. I want to spend some time today talking about virtualization. But before we get to virtualization, let's just talk generally about production and development licenses when it comes to Oracle. Without special permission from Oracle, specifically for the particular license that you are using, you must have a full license, even for the development environments. And that includes, in many instances, test environments and disaster recovery. I face a number of challenges each week from clients who either believed that they had the right to use licenses without full production licenses for development purposes only to learn that they didn't. The Oracle Partner Network gives folks limited rights to use licenses for development purposes, but there are many exceptions and they're not always easy to follow. And so I see a number of my clients struggling with how do we license our development environment? How do we license our disaster recovery environment? And what happens if we're wrong? How much is it going to cost if we're wrong? With the other competitors allowing you to either have free development licenses or moderately priced development licenses. For instance, if you wanted to develop on SQL Server, you could buy an MSDN subscription, and that one developer could develop as many SQL servers in the non-production environment as they wanted to for that one subscription. People are often very confused that Oracle doesn't have a great deal of clearly established opportunities for you to have discounted licenses without sometimes significant negotiation from Oracle. And so it is very important when developing in Oracle environments that the development team understands that there is typically not an opportunity for you to have wholesale unlimited deployments for development purposes without specific permission from Oracle. As I said, I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about virtualization because this is one of the second most common issues that I find in Oracle licensing internal reviews, proactive reviews, and Oracle audits. You have to use approved Oracle hard partitioning technology. In other words, you have to, in the virtualized environment, segment the virtualized machine so clearly that those machines cannot move within the virtual environment to other places. Many of you might be asking yourselves, what would be the point of virtualization if we had to lock it down that severely? And that is an excellent question. But for Oracle purposes, the more flexibility you have to take advantage of the virtualization capabilities that you have in your environment, the more licenses you have to buy. There is a great deal of confusion in the marketplace about VMware. VMware will work technologically with Oracle, but it is not an approved hard partitioning technology, and therefore it will not limit the number of licenses that you have to buy. And so it is commonly the case that people learn that VMware will work, quote unquote, with Oracle technology, and they believe that that means there are no licensing implications for using VMware, which is not the case. And so it is very important if you are using Oracle products in a VMware environment that you are very clear what the licensing obligations are, and you make sure that someone other than a salesman is talking you through how to license those products. As I said, I see many opportunities for misunderstandings and for folks not to understand how the licensing is going to work as it corresponds to VMware. I want to have one other just moment on processor licenses and talk a little bit about hosted cloud non-Oracle licenses. Oracle now has a third-party approved cloud policy. And as many of you have found, Oracle has a lot of policies that may or may not be incorporated by reference into its license agreements. But Oracle depends on these policies when they are evaluating a Oracle user's license position. So we just want to make sure that everybody is aware of and knows where to find the Oracle licensing policy on third-party cloud infrastructure services. So that way you can know how you're going to count the processors. Because as you can imagine, if you have licensed your infrastructure to AWS, that Amazon is not going to let Oracle come in and audit to see how many CPUs you might be using in that environment. And so what Oracle has done is said, if you're using certain AWS or Amazon services or certain Microsoft services, you may be allowed to use those virtual servers in a third-party cloud with Oracle software, but you have to report all of the virtual CPUs that you are paying for in the infrastructure invoices. And so it is somewhat complicated, and you want to make sure that before you outsource your infrastructure to AWS or Azure, or any of the other approved Microsoft or Amazon environments, that you understand whether that's going to mean that you have to buy more licenses. And there's also in that licensing policy a vague reference to the fact that you cannot certify at the end of a ULA the licenses that are in a third party's cloud. So it is worth noting that it could be possible that at the end of a ULA, any licenses that are in Azure or Microsoft cannot be included on a certification, at least according to the current iteration of the policy. And we're looking forward to clarification from Oracle on that to see if they changed their mind as more and more folks outsource infrastructure to third parties. All right, human license metrics. Excuse me. There are a couple of different types. The most common license metrics that we see that are based on the number of people are either named user plus licenses or number of employee licenses. A named user plus license is an individual who's authorized to use the program, not have actually used the program. So typically the way they see this is if there is a credential that would allow a person to access an Oracle product, that person is an authorized user, regardless of whether it's part of their job to use that Oracle product, and regardless of whether that person ever actually worked at Oracle, worked in a department that required Oracle. I have seen Oracle make adjustments when there is an individual who's authorized to access a program, but who no longer works at that company or no longer works in a particular division. Oracle may allow you to not count some of those folks, but just to be safe, it is more important for you to keep your lists up to date and make sure that no one is authorized to access the Oracle products unless they absolutely need to be. It's not a good idea to make everybody a default user because you will have to pay. Potentially. Additionally, beware of the minimum license quantities that are required per processor. So if you're licensing on a named user plus basis, you may not have to buy processor licenses for each of the installations of Oracle, but you still have to count them so that you can determine how many licenses you'll need for named users. So if you have 10 processors for a product that has a 25 named user plus minimum, you will have to buy 250 named user plus licenses, even if you only have 10 users. And so if there is a large disconnect between how many users you actually need and the minimums when you add up the extent of the installations on the processors of the Oracle products. You may want to address that with Oracle before you start using that product in that environment, because there is an opportunity for you to have to buy way too many licenses given what your use cases may be. They also have an opportunity to have licenses that are a number of employees, excuse me, rather than a number of employees rather than a number of named users. These are defined as active employees, and in this case, active users are irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether somebody uses the software. It is also not important whether they are authorized or required to do it as part of their job. If you license Oracle products on a number of employees basis, at this time, you have to pay for all of the licenses. Revenue-based licenses. Anytime you have a license that is based on the amount of revenue that's attributable to a particular subsidiary or line of business, you have to be very, very careful. And the reason you have to be careful with the revenue-based licenses is in many instances, people don't realize that certain revenues that they believe should be excluded are actually going to be included. So it is very clear, it is not always very clear that revenue-based licenses are going to be counted appropriately. So for instance, if you say all of the revenue that we get from our shipping line of business will be counted for this revenue-based license, and then you buy a new subsidiary that has a different shipping business, is that shipping revenue now going to be counted in your revenue-based licenses? The answer is typically it is not clear, and Oracle may decide that they want you to give the least favorable definition to you and the most favorable definition to them. And so it is very important and very tricky when you are working with revenue-based licenses to determine, number one, which revenue is going to be included or excluded in the bands of revenue that are licensable. What's the appropriate value per unit? Do you pay one license fee for every $1 million in revenue? Do you pay one license fee for every $100 in revenue? How much should you discount off MSRP when you're dealing with revenue-based licenses? How will subsidiaries contribute, if at all? Who's allowed to use the licenses, and can we allow certain subsidiaries to use them even if they don't contribute to even if their revenue doesn't contribute to the licensing fees? Those are the types of questions that I often find myself answering for clients when dealing with revenue-based licenses. So we just want to make sure that people are identifying all of these issues and addressing them as much as possible. I'm getting several questions about whether or not there will be an opportunity for you to print the slides or whether we'll make them available. If you send an email to Diana Peterson at dpeterson@scottandscottllp.com, she will be happy to send you a copy of the slides. And I know that some folks had trouble seeing the slides at the beginning of the presentation, but you should be able to see them now. For those who couldn't see them at the beginning, you missed maybe 2 slides. So not a great deal of slides were missed, but we'll be happy to provide you with copies of the full slide deck upon request. Unlimited license agreements. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about unlimited license agreements because I think this is one of the opportunities for clients to get in a lot of trouble. The typical term for an unlimited license agreement is 3 years. I have seen terms that are shorter and longer, but that's the usual term that people sign up for. And the way it works is Oracle will take what you tell them with respect to how much you think you're going to use. They'll account for it within a certain margin of error, and then they will price your agreement based on the expected and anticipated use. If you use more or less, there is no need to adjust during the ULA, because at the end, you will certify this is the amount of Oracle products that we are using. When you certify that number, you will be required to pay maintenance on all of those licenses. And so it is commonly the case that people find that they are they're certifying the number of Oracle products that they use during the ULA term, but after the ULA term has expired, they don't really need all those licenses going forward indefinitely and have trouble because they are required to continue paying maintenance on the full estate of the licenses that they certified as part of the ULA. The Oracle prices are based on the current use and the estimated growth. If there's a wild fluctuation between those two and you don't renew your ULA at the end, there can be problems with Oracle and how they price the maintenance going forward, how they identify the proposal for a new ULA. And again, I just want to reiterate, if there are any of these licenses that are deployed pursuant to ULA in a third-party cloud environment, it could be problematic because Oracle says, at the moment anyway, that those licenses will not be able to be certified at the end of the term. The reason that the unlimited license agreements are proving to be difficult for a number of clients is one of the reasons many of my clients get into an unlimited license agreement in the first place with Oracle is they have trouble counting how many licenses they're consuming in their environment. And so they think, I'll get into an unlimited license agreement, and that way I'll tell them what I think I'm using, and we'll pay them based on that. And then in 3 years, we will figure out how to count how many Oracle licenses we're using. But as everyone can imagine, that 3 years sounds very far away when you sign up for the ULA, and you don't spend that 3-year period of time learning how to count how many licenses you have available or how many licenses you're consuming. And then when it's time to certify at the end, it is difficult to know how to start because you haven't been requiring your folks to count Oracle licenses all along. So as a good practice, it is important to make sure that everybody knows how to count how many licenses you're consuming throughout your ULA, because you never know when it's going to be time for the company to decide that it does not want to continue with that process or with that license agreement, and when you'll need to have confidence that you certified the correct number. An inappropriate or an unsupportable certification at the end of a ULA is a very common mechanism that triggers an audit by Oracle. And it is also the case that if you've been in a ULA for a very long time and you cancel it, that also puts you on the radar for an audit. I was last summer presenting at a conference in Chicago, and when I said, if you cancel your ULA, you should prepare for an audit, Oracle objected and said there was no way that they could audit everyone who canceled a ULA. While I agree that may be true, many people who contacted me for the first time who received an audit have just canceled their ULA or have just substantially reduced their annual maintenance spend. And so while I think it is true that it is not necessarily a one-to-one correlation between a termination or an expiration of a ULA and an audit, there is definitely some connection. And so if you are lowering your Oracle spend, if you are changing your unlimited license in any way, just be prepared for a license review, which is a good idea anyway. It is a good idea for you to always be prepared for an external license review. All right. Challenges with the ULA. If you can't count your licenses, you cannot certify them. If you engage somebody else to help you count your licenses, they are not going to be the ones certifying. So if you engage an outside vendor to help you identify any challenges or problems with your certification numbers, make sure you understand what their qualifications are, and make sure that if you're paying them to do this, that you understand completely what obligations they are going to be liable for, if any, and which ones they're not. It is very uncomfortable when you pay somebody tens of thousands of dollars to help you identify how many licenses you should certify to Oracle, only to find out when the certification number is wrong that no one is going to help you or support you against Oracle. They're just going to say, I'm sorry, there was a big mistake, and we can't help you with that. Another challenge that I see is that my clients have overly ambitious expectations about what they'll be able to accomplish in a 3-year period. So my client will say, we're going to move all of our systems to Oracle database backend, and we're going to do that within the next 3 years. And so during the ULA term, we want to buy a bunch of Oracle database products so that we're going to include in our estimate for the ULA pricing this new use for Oracle database that we haven't had before. In many instances, that use case never manifests in the organization. So you think you're going to move everything to Oracle database, and then in a year and a half, when you've spec'd it out and you've built the test environment and you tried to make it work, it didn't work. And so you never used the licenses that you thought you would use. There is no way to go back and get your money back for that. You'll just have to, you're buying flexibility. And in this case, you didn't maximize the value of that flexibility because your business needs changed. So that is one of the challenges with ULA is you're guessing. And sometimes you guess wrong and you use many more licenses than you thought you would, but sometimes you guess wrong and you use far fewer licenses than you thought you would, in which case you don't get much value from the ULA. So those are some of the challenges that my clients are facing with ULAs. And I know that a lot of people continue to renew ULAs even when they don't necessarily want to, simply because sometimes you've gotten yourself into it, you still haven't learned how to verifiably and accurately assess what you have installed or who can access certain products. And so because you don't want to stop and lose business momentum with revenue generating opportunities, so that you can teach your team how to count your Oracle licenses, you just continue to execute ULAs and certify the best you can so that you don't have to actually get good at counting. I would say that is leaving a lot of opportunities for savings on the table, and it is definitely not in anybody's best interest for you to be guessing for that, for an extended period of time. So it is worthwhile to get adept at counting how many licenses you're consuming so that you can make sure that you're getting value for the pricing, and you can make sure if you do eventually want to switch to a perpetual license model, you can do so without much challenge from Oracle. The hottest topic in Oracle licensing right now is Java licensing. For many, many years, Java redistributable components have been free. Oracle announced that next year it is going to start charging for some parts of Java licensing, and it is not, as I'm sure will be no surprise to this group, it is not always clear who is going to be required to pay and who isn't. So for instance, the Java SE 8 and 9, still free. Oracle has announced that it's going to discontinue support on Java 8, and so you might be able to still distribute it for free, but you might not be able to get portions of it supported. But the SE Advanced Desktop, Advanced, and Suite are all paid licenses going forward. Oracle has published license fees for these products. For instance, I think the Advanced Desktop MSRP is about $40. So you may think that's not that much, and this shouldn't be a big issue, but keep in mind that the published minimum for named users is typically 2,000 for these products. So I'm not very great at math, but $40 times 2,000 users can add up pretty quickly. And it is not clear what kind of historical discount you should be entitled to, if any, with respect to the Java distributables. And there are some products that used to be free, for instance, the runtime, that may require a license fee but may not. And so that part is continuing to raise a lot of questions in the market about if I already have this runtime product embedded, is my particular use case a licensable use case? Do I get grandfathered in because this product is already in my environment? And how can I tell whether it requires a license or not? And for the runtime, what's the fee? If I'm using it in this way that requires a license, which isn't very clear, what do I have to pay for it? And sometimes that's not clear either. So I think there are a lot of open questions about what's going to happen with Java, and it's making people uncomfortable about rolling out new products that are incorporating Java within those new products simply because of the uncertainty with the license usage. One final thing, even though there are some components that are free and they're bundled with other components, in some instances, for example, the Java usage tracker, that is included in the installer. It has free components near it, but the Java usage tracker is still a licensable product, even though they might distribute it to you for free. You may have to pay for it if you retain it or install it in certain environments. So a lot of uncertainty related to Java, a lot of challenges. There aren't a tremendous number of audits that are involving this Java licensing at the moment. There are some, but it's not the most common type of audit we see. But there are so many questions about what is going to happen with the new versions of Java licensing. And I think Oracle is trying to do a fairly decent job of addressing some of those questions, but it is just not possible to address every potential use case that a customer may have. And because there are those ambiguities in the marketplace, people are very concerned about the impact that this licensing change will have in their environments. Oracle has been buying a lot of companies for a while, and one of the things that we find is that when they acquire those companies, there can be licensing implications. And so in many instances, Oracle will procure a company, and you may have an unlimited license with that company. So you may have a relationship, you may have an existing license agreement, you may be paying license maintenance fees on this product, and Oracle comes along and says, we own the product now, and we are not going to support your installations, and we're not going to give you technical support unless you upgrade to the latest version. And when you upgrade to the latest version, you need a new license agreement, typically an Oracle master agreement. You need many, many attachments to your Oracle master agreement, and you need a new ordering document. And when you do all of those things, we're going to change your license metric from an unlimited license that you had with the original publisher to a new license metric where you pay us either based on processors or users or revenue or one of those other license metrics that Oracle typically uses. So it is commonly the case that you believe you have a right to use it in a certain way, the product in a certain way, and you either lost that right to use it or you negotiated with Oracle in a way that required you to give up your existing licenses and replace them with new licenses. So I see this with suites of products. Oracle, for the business intelligence suite, may change the name and change the offerings in a suite and then change the pricing, of course, but the Oracle will say, don't you want to switch from the old suite to the new suite? And we can give you a pricing discount, but it will require you to terminate your old licenses. And so you'll see license transition documents that require you to uninstall old products. One of the places I see this the most is when Oracle has acquired a company and has now convinced its end user to switch licensing metrics to a cloud licensing model. And so what happens is Oracle sends an Oracle Master Agreement, an OMA, to the client. It sends an ordering document, and then it sends a cloud services agreement. And each of those documents typically reference other documents online, some of which are hundreds of pages long. And so Oracle will say, we're changing your licensing metric, and you have a lot of cross-reference documents that you have to be aware of, some of which may change our requirement to provide service to you, some of which may change your obligations to Oracle, and some of which may negatively impact how much you have to pay with respect to the licenses that you used to have. You'll get caught up in negotiating those provisions that have all those cross-references in them, and my experience is that people then sometimes don't notice that one of the provisions in that ordering document is a requirement that all of the old licenses that are either unsupported or an unfavorable license metric that Oracle doesn't like are terminated in the ordering document, and you have usually 90 days to install the new products that replace the old products. So in other words, we have one type of suite. Oracle says, we're not going to offer that anymore. If you want support, you have to upgrade to this new suite. And the next thing you know, you have no legal right to use the old suite that you paid countless dollars for over a vast number of years. So just make sure that if there's any opportunity for you to migrate after an acquisition from an unsupported license to a supported license, that we are well aware of the fact that Oracle may be changing all of your terms by asking you to sign a new master agreement. Oracle may just try to change some of your terms in an ordering document and will often require you to terminate the old licenses. And the pricing models will often change, and particularly when you've had an unlimited license opportunity with an existing vendor who becomes acquired by Oracle. So those are some of the challenges that my clients are encountering with respect to products that they continue to use after Oracle becomes the owner of that product. So we're going to spend the rest of the time talking in detail about audits and about challenges related to audits. Oracle is, as I'm sure many of you have experienced firsthand, very focused on its audit activity. Oracle does occasionally identify an outside third party to conduct the audits for it, but typically, especially in the US, it conducts the license review from LMS or License Management Services. And many of my clients say, why should I respond to this Oracle audit at all? And the answer is because in most agreements, whether it's an OMA or an OLSA, in most agreements, there is a requirement that Oracle be allowed to audit. There are some opportunities to disagree with Oracle about what the scope of the audit is, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail in a few minutes, but first I wanted to give everybody an overview of how the audit goes. So what will happen is Oracle will reach out to its end user and say, you have been selected for an audit. Don't be alarmed. We do this to everyone. It's just your turn. Please contact us right away so we can kick off the audit and get started. Oracle will then want to talk to you about the audit. Many of my clients are savvy enough to request a non-disclosure agreement from Oracle in an audit situation. And Oracle's response is that there's already a confidentiality agreement in most licensing agreements, and that there's no need to do a separate confidentiality agreement. For a couple of reasons, we don't necessarily agree with Oracle on all of that. For instance, it is not clear that items that are produced during a software audit are covered in the definition of confidential information. But once you understand that there are some limitations in the confidentiality definitions in an Oracle agreement, I think that those can be fairly easily dispensed. Once you get comfortable with confidentiality or non-disclosure protections, Oracle will want to give you an Oracle server worksheet, the spreadsheet to fill out to give them an opportunity to evaluate what is in use at the customer's organization. This could be very difficult if it's a global operation, if there are servers that are in multiple data centers that are not necessarily within the end users or the customer's control entirely. It can be difficult if, as I said, the end users don't know how to count the Oracle environment or the processors being used in that environment. And it can be further complicated by the fact that Oracle wants you to validate the information, typically by the running of scripts or queries that Oracle provides to you. I'm sure a lot of you are squirming in your seats right now because it is not very popular for large operations with very secure data centers to allow third parties to install or ask us to install anything in those operations. So for instance, if you have a data center, and this is a common issue that I see, if you have a data center that has a lot of your client data in it, and your clients are federal governments of countries like the United States or Canada, you have an agreement with that client that no one will touch those machines and that nothing will be installed on those machines unless it's approved by the client themselves. That creates a disconnect because Oracle will come along potentially and say, we need you to run a query or a script on this machine and tell us what is installed. So what you don't want to do is have a situation where you are at the very outset of the audit sideways or in a dispute with Oracle about what you will do and what you won't do to identify what is installed on those machines. So it is better, as always, to address these issues at the beginning of a relationship or before you purchase and install these licenses than after you are in the middle of an audit. So what you would do is say, hey, Oracle, I understand you want the right to audit these licenses we're about to purchase. Let us tell you what our challenge is. These are government machines. They are highly secure. They are top secret, and no one is allowed to touch them. How do you handle this with your other clients? If you address that issue before there's an actual audit, it will be much less painful than trying to address it after there's an audit, when it seems like what you're really doing is just trying to stall or trying to avoid answering the questions. So that's a challenge related to audits, is how do we get the data, and what if there's a disconnect between what Oracle is asking us to do and what our security team will allow us to do. In many instances, the agreement says that you will cooperate with reasonable requests for information. It may not surprise you all to learn that Oracle may think that the scripts that it's asking for you to run in the environment are reasonable, and you or someone on your team may think that they are not reasonable. So I always like to address that to the extent possible at the outset of the relationship or before the licenses are installed rather than after. Once you fill out the Oracle Server Worksheet and you provide to Oracle any of the details that they need to determine how many licenses you want or you require, they will compare the licenses that you have installed or what they say your license requirement is with what you can prove that you own and have under maintenance. So those are two challenges that folks face when dealing with Oracle audits. Can you prove you own the license? And can you prove that the licenses that you need to use are under maintenance? Why is that a problem? Why is that important? Why do you need to know those things? Well, you need to know those things because it is commonly the case that Oracle doesn't have a record of all of your products that you own. It can be that you might think, why? How could they not know what I'm paying for? I'm sending them checks for maintenance every year, and they're not small checks. Oracle should be able to keep track of this easily. And in many instances, they can. But when they can't, it is incumbent on you and your team to provide that information so that you can demonstrate to Oracle, hey, look, we really do have these licenses, or these licenses are under support. I have seen many companies not get credit for the licenses either they transferred or that a subsidiary acquired and negotiated a license for all of the affiliates to be able to use. And Oracle has taken some strange positions in the past where clients thought that the licenses were unequivocally transferred, including where Oracle says, you know, we see that you have a signed copy of the transfer agreement, but we don't have a copy of it, and we're not accepting the copy you're providing us. So that's one example of something that Oracle has said to, to challenge the license entitlements that a client believed that they had. So make sure that when you are gathering your information to present to Oracle your representation of what the license entitlements are, that you can that you can justify any of those transfers or other items, so that you don't have an unpleasant situation where you can't find the paperwork and Oracle says it never got it, and so therefore the transfer didn't happen. The other item that I want you to be aware of is, as I'm sure everyone knows, Oracle has a matching support policy. What does that mean? I wish I could say it's completely clear, but as most things Oracle related, it isn't. Some people say, and the Oracle license agreement says, that you must maintain active support on all licenses that are in the same product family. And it has lists and white papers that help you try to identify what is in the same product family. That seems fairly straightforward, but in practice, it is not always the case that the auditors are applying that policy regularly across the board and consistently. And so what sometimes happens is someone will say, no, you have the same SO number or the same service order number on these products. And so even though they don't fall in the same product family, because they are on the same service order, or they have the same SO number, you're required to maintain support on all of those licenses as well. That isn't always necessarily supportable by the agreements, but it does sometimes devolve into a disagreement about what position Oracle is going to take in a license review or in a maintenance renewal. So make sure that you're completely up to speed on whether or not you're going to be required to maintain support on all licenses, particularly if you're about to start maintaining them for the first time under an unlimited license agreement that is expired, you want to make sure that you know, can you terminate a subset of those licenses, and is there a penalty? In some instances, both inside the audit forum and outside an audit forum, people are unpleasantly surprised to learn that terminating licenses to reduce support actually costs more to support going forward, because Oracle will say, look, you used to support 1,000 licenses, and you supported that 1,000 licenses for $1 million. Now you want to reduce it to 500 licenses, but we gave you an extra discount when you were supporting 1,000 licenses. So now that you've dropped it to 500, it's 1.2 million because you've lost the value of the discount. I'm sure some of you are nodding your head in agreement because this is something that you've heard. I'm just addressing this within the Oracle audit surprises category because that's often the case where my clients learn this pricing discount removal approach is in response to an audit. Finally, when tactically and when you are dealing with responding to an audit, make sure that you understand how Oracle is going to evaluate situations that involve arguable functionality that's enabled but never used. So a great example of this is Oracle database. The difference between standard and enterprise is not a technical difference. The difference is a licensing difference. And so functionally, the standard and the enterprise versions are either identical or have very small differences that aren't meaningful for these purposes. But any of the diagnostics pack, the tuning pack, the partitioning, any of those functionalities that are only allowed with enterprise versions of database have to be completely and properly disabled before you can qualify for standard licensing. And I find that that is one of the most unpleasant audit surprises, is that either a team has not adequately disabled or has not disabled in such a way that is no longer a licensable feature. And so if any of the licensable features are enabled in the database, like tuning pack, that then requires an enterprise license rather than a standard license, and also requires licenses for the tuning pack. So those are very unpleasant surprises. I will also reiterate the surprise that production licenses and development licenses are not necessarily that much different when it comes to pricing. And there is one final audit surprise that I want to bring up that not everyone is aware of. If you have negotiated a limited use license, this is often a negotiation that is in conjunction with a hosted application that an Oracle end user will provide to its end users. Make sure that you have the proper information filed, including what Oracle calls a PARF, which is a proprietary application hosting registration form. On the PARF, it will say, this is what Oracle product we use, this is the name of our product, and here's generally who we distribute it to. Those limited use licenses without the proper completed hosting registration forms can be deemed not proper use cases and therefore out of compliance, even if you have a sufficient number of licenses to cover those installations. So I want to say that one more time. Even if you have enough licenses to cover all the installations, if your use case falls outside of your license agreement, in other words, someone else is using it who doesn't have the ability to use it, one of your affiliates is using it when there's not an express right to do so, or you're using a limited license for a purpose that's not included in the limitation, Oracle will consider all of those scenarios unlicensed, even if you have enough licenses and you've paid for enough licenses to cover it from a technical perspective, it may be a violation of the license agreement anyway. And so it's something that people are very uncomfortable about when they encounter it. The last item that I want to cover today in the audit section is what happens if you disagree with Oracle. So you've gone through all of these steps and Oracle has said to you, look, we have evaluated your organization. We don't think you did your certification right. We think that you didn't disable all the packs, all the optional packs. And so you have to buy enterprise licenses instead of the standard licenses that you own, and you owe us $2 million. In your license agreement, there is generally no opportunity for you to object to those license findings, those license compliance findings. So if you say, I don't agree with you, Oracle, I don't owe you $2 million, I think I owe you nothing, there is no contractual support for you to make that position. Because what it says in your license agreement is if Oracle finds a deficiency, you will pay it in 30 days. It doesn't say usually. You will pay it if you agree, or you will pay it if you you will pay it unless you have a question about it, or Oracle has to listen to you and be reasonable in its assessment of whether you're right. It typically doesn't say any of those things. So what happens if you decide, even though Oracle has the contractual right to demand the payment, and even though you have a contractual obligation to pay it upon demand, what happens if you say no? Oracle believes that it has the right to terminate all of your licenses if you don't pay. So I want to just make sure that I'm driving this part home. All of your licenses, not the licenses that are in dispute, not the subset of licenses that formed the basis of the audit findings. If you acquired the licenses under a master agreement, Oracle believes it can terminate all of those licenses. And the process for termination is Oracle will say, we are giving you notice that you're in breach. You have 30 days to pay. If you don't, we'll terminate your license. And then you have that 30 days to pay and you will potentially be terminated. So in days, that's 60 days from the date of demand to the date of notice of, to the date that the license is terminated. As most of you know, it would take more than 18 months to completely remove Oracle from most environments, and in some cases, it is not possible. So 60 days is not very much time for you to resolve this with Oracle if Oracle is taking the position in your case that it's about to terminate your licenses. So when you are negotiating purchases with Oracle, make sure that you understand that this is what your audit process is going to look like. And if it's not okay with you, do something about it before you're in an audit, not after. Because telling people when you're in a defensive position where there's at least an accusation that you're in breach of your license agreement, as you can imagine, packs way less of a punch than telling them we're not spending $5 million buying these licenses unless you give us some better audit provisions that give us some protections in the case that you're not being reasonable. So it is certainly something that everybody wants to consider, even though it is very difficult and sometimes impossible to get revisions to agreements. You have to at least try, and keep in mind that these types of provisions and these types of restrictions may mean that Oracle is not the solution for you. If Oracle says we cannot negotiate on this, make sure that you're evaluating these pitfalls and the value of the ability for them to change your license metrics when determining, is this the right company for us to use for this project? It looks like that we are wrapping up. I may have time for one question, so I'm just going to peruse through and see if there are any questions. Most of them are related to slides, but I do have one question that appears to be substantive, and I'll address this before we wrap up. even if the issue of installing Oracle scripts to count licenses has not been addressed up front, what right would Oracle have to insist that someone installed these scripts, and doing so violate the contractual obligations? That's not a direct quote. I summarized it. But basically, there is usually no direct contractual requirement that you run Oracle scripts, but Oracle will tell you that you have the right to demonstrate that you're compliant with the license. And in some cases, the only way you can do that, they say, is with a script. And so if you have an alternative that will show them the same information that will allow them to validate the licenses, they may consider it. But the issue is you have the contractual obligation to keep track of your licenses and on demand, show them the information that demonstrates that you're still compliant. And so in their response, they'll say, okay, don't run the scripts, but show us how you've complied with this provision that says that you have to demonstrate to us anytime we ask for it that you're in compliance. And so that's how the situation could become tricky. And it's one of the reasons that I think it's very important to make sure that you're constantly testing yourself to make sure that you know how to evaluate your license position at any time. This has been Oracle Licensing and Audit Strategies. My name is Julie Machal-Fulks with Scott & Scott, and I greatly appreciate your attendance and your attention today. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.